The first thing I noticed when I came home 2 days early was that my 9-year-old daughter was lying on the kitchen floor with one sock missing. The second thing I noticed was that nobody else seemed alarmed. My wife Elise was in the sunroom laughing with her sister and her mother over takeout boxes and wedding samples, while my daughter Nora barely responded when I said her name. I dropped my suitcase, knelt beside her, and touched her cheek. Her skin was warm, her breathing was slow. "Nora, sweetheart, open your eyes." Nothing. Elise appeared in the doorway holding a glass of wine and said, "Grant, don't turn this into a crisis." She got worked up again, so I gave her something to help her settle. I looked at my daughter on the tile, and then at the woman I had trusted to care for her whenever my job took me out of town. "What did you give her?" Elise rolled her eyes. "Children's nighttime allergy medicine. She's had it before. She gets impossible when she spirals." That word impossible followed me into the hospital, through the end of my marriage, and all the way to Thanksgiving, when Elise's mother finally said I was destroying an entire family over one overwhelmed stepmother making one bad call. Nora looked across the table and whispered, "It wasn't one bad call. She gave it to me when she wanted me to disappear. No one reached for dessert after that. My name is Grant Holloway. I was 42 years old when this happened, living in a comfortable neighborhood outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked as a senior project director for a company that built and renovated distribution centers across the Southeast. In plain English, I traveled too much, answered too many emails at airports, and believed being good at solving emergencies for everyone else made me a responsible man. My daughter's mother, Rebecca, died when Nora was 3. Ovarian cancer. Fast, brutal, unfair. For almost 4 years after that, it was just Nora and me. I learned to braid hair from online videos, packed lunches that looked like evidence from a failed experiment, and became surprisingly good at making blueberry pancakes shaped like animals that did not resemble any known species. Nora was bright, observant, and sensitive in a way I once thought was fragile, and later understood was simply honest. She noticed when adults lied to make things easier. She noticed when someone's smile changed around certain people. She noticed when I said, "I'll be home Friday," and my flight changed to Saturday. She loved weather maps, watercolor paint, frogs, and old photographs of Rebecca. She hated loud restaurants and scratchy dresses. She remembered exactly 3 things about her mother without help from pictures: Rebecca singing in the car, Rebecca's lemon shampoo, and the sound of her laugh from the hallway. When Nora was 6, I met Elise Martin at a commercial real estate fundraiser in Charlotte. Elise was 36, divorced, funny, polished, and raising a son named Camden, who was 10. She worked as a home stylist for luxury listings and managed social media for a few real estate teams. She understood presentation instinctively. She could walk into a room, move 3 lamps in a chair, and suddenly everything looked twice as expensive. The first time she met Nora, she did not force affection. She asked whether Nora wanted to show her the frog habitat she had built behind our townhouse. Nora said, "It's not a habitat, it's a plastic box with mud." Elise said, "Those are usually how habitats start." Nora liked her immediately, so did I. We married 18 months later and moved into a 5-bedroom brick house in Matthews with a screened porch, a small backyard, and enough bedrooms that both children had space. I wanted stability. I wanted Nora to have a woman in the house who could someday become something like family without replacing Rebecca. I wanted Camden to feel I was not competing with his father, Todd, who lived nearby and stayed involved. I told myself blended families succeeded when adults worked hard enough. That belief turned out to be only half true. Adults can work very hard at building the wrong thing. For the first year, our house felt ordinary in the best way. Friday, pizza. Homework at the island. Camden leaving sports equipment everywhere. Nora making tiny paper weather stations for her stuffed animals. Elise posted photographs of our beautifully messy blended life, and I believed the caption because the mess looked real enough. Then small differences began appearing. Camden was outgoing, athletic, easy with adults. Nora needed time. If a restaurant was crowded, she sometimes went quiet. If she missed me while I traveled, she asked the same question several times. "When are you really coming home?" Elise interpreted these differences as character. Camden was confident. Nora was anxious. Camden needed freedom. Nora needed boundaries. If Camden forgot his cleats, Elise drove back because his team depended on him. If Nora forgot a library book, Elise said natural consequences built responsibility. If Camden left dishes in the media room, she sighed and called him, "Such a boy." If Nora left art supplies on the dining table, Elise told her the entire family should not have to live around her chaos. I noticed some of it. I also accepted Elise's explanation that the children needed different things. That explanation was not entirely false, which is what made it dangerous. Elise's mother, Marjorie, made the favoritism easier to see. Marjorie adored Camden. He was her first grandson, her little man, even after he grew tall enough to look down at her. Nora was sweet girl. At Christmas, Camden received gifts based on conversations he barely remembered having. Nora received gifts based on whatever aisle Marjorie had walked through. One year, Camden got personalized batting gloves. Nora got a glitter craft kit even though she had stopped liking glitter after second grade. When I pointed it out, Marjorie said, "She is lucky to have so many people buying for her at all." Elise later told me I had embarrassed her mother. I apologized. I became very good at apologizing for noticing things. My biggest mistake was how often I compensated instead of confronting. If Marjorie bought Camden something expensive, I quietly bought Nora something thoughtful. If Elise skipped Nora's school event because Camden had a game, I rearranged a work call and went. If Nora looked excluded from family photographs, I took pictures of her myself later. I told myself I was protecting my daughter. What I was actually doing was making it easier for everyone else to continue. The parent who silently repairs every imbalance can become the reason the imbalance survives. Then there was social media. Elise's work meant everything could become content. Sunday breakfast, pumpkin patches, school mornings, matching Christmas pajamas. Camden loved cameras and knew how to produce a grin instantly. Nora hated being told to repeat a reaction. More and more, she disappeared from posts. One Saturday, Elise uploaded a carousel captioned, "My favorite humans in the life we built." The first photograph was Elise and Camden at his baseball tournament. The second was Elise and me at brunch. The third was Camden carrying groceries into the house. Nora appeared only in the background of one image, bending over to tie her shoe. She saw it and asked, "Am I not one of your favorite humans?" Elise laughed like the question was ridiculous. "Of course you are. You just refuse to cooperate for photos." Nora said, "I didn't refuse. I said I didn't want to do the same walk 3 times. Elise answered, "Exactly. I should have stopped everything right there and listened to what that exchange meant. Instead, I told Nora she did not need social media to know she was loved." True sentence, wrong response. The first warning from school arrived during a trip to Savannah. Nora's third-grade teacher emailed because Nora had been unusually sleepy on 2 Mondays and once put her head down during reading. I called Elise immediately. She said Nora had seasonal allergies and had been awake late crying about Rebecca. "You know how she gets when you travel," Elise added. I gave her children's allergy medicine so she could sleep. I felt guilty for being away. That guilt swallowed the question I should have asked. 2 months later, the school nurse called because Nora felt dizzy during lunch. I was in Birmingham. Elise picked her up and texted, "She's fine. Drama plus no sleep. Already home in bed." I called that evening. Elise said Nora had just fallen asleep and told me not to wake her because hearing your voice starts the whole abandonment spiral again. I believe the adult standing in my house instead of insisting on hearing my child. That still hurts to admit. The wedding made everything worse. Elise's younger sister, Paige, got engaged to a physical therapist named Evan and planned a November wedding at a vineyard near Asheville the weekend after Thanksgiving. Paige genuinely liked Nora and originally asked her to be a junior bridesmaid. Camden was going to be a junior usher. Nora was thrilled. She drew versions of the bridesmaid dress in her sketchbook and told her friends she was basically in charge of not dropping flowers. Then, after a dress fitting in late spring, Elise told me Paige had decided the bridal party was becoming too complicated and Nora would attend as family instead. Camden remained an usher. "Why is only Nora out?" I asked. Elise said Nora had become overwhelmed at the fitting and cried because the dress was uncomfortable. Paige doesn't need unpredictable energy on her wedding day. I hated the sentence. Later, I asked Nora what happened. She said, "Mom, Elise gave me the purple medicine because I was talking too much and then I got sleepy. Aunt Paige thought I was sick." I asked what purple medicine. Nora shrugged. "The stuff that makes me calm." I confronted Elise. She laughed in disbelief. It was allergy medicine. She was sneezing and rubbing her eyes all morning. Was she? "Grant, are you seriously interrogating me because a child remembers being sleepy?" She said I was treating her like a suspect instead of a wife. I backed down. That apology is the one I replay the most. By summer, my travel schedule became relentless. We were opening 3 warehouse projects within 10 weeks, and I spent nights in Atlanta, Greenville, Jacksonville, and Houston. Elise's texts about Nora became increasingly negative. She cried because you missed bedtime. She embarrassed me in front of friends. She wouldn't stay upstairs during Camden's sleepover. She keeps making everything about Rebecca. Sometimes, when I called, Nora sounded slow. Once she said, "Mom gave me the quiet syrup." Elise took the phone and said Nora had a cough. "Do not encourage this need for attention," she whispered after sending Nora away. "She knows you feel guilty, and she uses it." That sentence found exactly the weak place in me. I had built my identity around not failing Nora after Rebecca died. Elise knew that. So whenever I questioned her, she made the questioning itself evidence that Nora was manipulating me. I wanted to believe I had married someone who understood children better than I did. I wanted to believe the house was fine. People can ignore almost anything if accepting it would destroy the life they worked hard to build. In August, I was scheduled to spend 6 days in Dallas. On the 4th afternoon, a city inspection was postponed, and the remaining meetings moved online. I could have stayed. Instead, I changed my flight and decided to surprise the family. At the airport, I bought Camden a Cowboys cap because he collected sports hats, and Nora a stuffed fox with absurdly large ears because she had been drawing foxes for weeks. I texted nobody. I landed in Charlotte a little after 10 and was home before midnight. The garage was dark, but light glowed through the windows facing the screened porch. I heard voices as soon as I entered. Elise, Marjorie, Paige, and Camden were laughing over Chinese takeout and wedding invitation samples. I thought, normal night. Then I saw Nora's backpack open beside the mudroom. Her homework folder was on the floor. One sneaker sat near the bench. The other was several feet away. I followed the hallway and found her curled beside the kitchen island, cheek against the tile, one hand under her chest. Nora? Nothing. I dropped my suitcase. "Nora, baby." Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Her breathing scared me immediately. I shouted Elise's name. She walked in carrying wine and stopped when she saw me. Her first expression was not fear. It was surprise that I was home. "What happened?" I demanded. "Nothing. She had a fit earlier. She won't wake up. She's sleeping." "On the floor?" "She came downstairs after I told her to stay in bed. Honestly, she has been impossible tonight." There was that word, impossible. "What did you give her?" Elise's mouth tightened. "Don't start." "What did you give my daughter?" "A little nighttime allergy medicine. She was crying and saying she couldn't breathe because you weren't home." I was trying to calm her down. Marjorie appeared behind her and said, "Grant, please don't make a scene." Elise has had a very difficult evening. My daughter was barely responsive on the floor. Her mother-in-law was worried about the evening. I called emergency services. Elise hissed, "You're going to terrify her." I looked at Nora. I think someone should have been terrified earlier. The paramedics arrived quickly. One of them, a woman named Denise, kept looking around the hallway like something felt familiar. After Nora was stabilized enough to move, Denise asked me quietly whether I traveled often. "Yes." "Were you home in March?" "What happened in March?" She studied my face. I responded to this address. "Your daughter was extremely difficult to wake. Your wife said Nora accidentally took a second dose of allergy medication because she forgot she had already been given some. She said you were in Florida and fully informed." My stomach dropped. "I was in Orlando. Nobody told me." Denise went still. "You didn't know?" "No." In the ambulance, I held Nora's hand and watched the lights move across the ceiling. I did not think about revenge. I thought about every email I had forwarded instead of investigating, every call Elise told me not to make because Nora was asleep, every time I allowed a plausible explanation to become the end of the conversation. At the hospital, the doctor told me Nora had a sedating antihistamine in her system at a level concerning for her age and body size. I will not turn this into medication details because the exact numbers are not the story. The pattern was, Elise arrived later in clean clothes with light makeup, sat beside me, and said, "This looks bad because you walked in at the worst possible moment." "What would the best possible moment look like?" She rolled her eyes. "You know what I mean." "No, I don't anymore." When a doctor asked whether Lila had a history of taking medication herself, Vanessa said, "She has gotten into things before." From the bed, Nora opened her eyes and whispered, No, I haven't. The room changed. Elise froze. The doctor asked her to wait outside. I sat beside Nora. She looked exhausted and scared. Is Mom Elise mad? You do not worry about that. I didn't mean to come downstairs. Why were you upstairs? Nora picked at the edge of the blanket. She wanted me quiet because Aunt Paige and Grandma were doing wedding stuff. Did she give you medicine? A nod. Did you ask for it? She shook her head. Does this happen other times? Silence. I waited. Sometimes. When? When Camden has friends. When Mommy Elise has wine ladies. When Grandma comes over and says I'm too moody. Sometimes if I cry when you're gone. My throat tightened. What does she call it? Quiet syrup. How does it make you feel? Like I'm underwater and everybody is far away. I felt something inside me break cleanly. Have you told her you don't like it? Yes. What did she say? Nora looked at me as if the answer should be obvious. She said that's how she knows it works. I had to turn my face away for 1 second. Then I looked back and said the only thing that mattered. You did nothing wrong. None of this was because you were difficult. None of it was because you cried or missed me or missed your mom. Nora's eyes filled. She says I make the house heavy when I talk about Mom Rebecca. You are allowed to remember your mother. She says Camden deserves normal family nights because his dad left and he already lost one family. I stared at her. And what family are you? Nora's voice dropped. The sad one. That was the moment my marriage ended. Not when I found her on the floor. Not when the paramedic told me there had been another emergency. It ended when I realized my wife had taught a 9-year-old that grief made her a burden and sedation made her easier to love. The hospital involved the professionals required in situations like that. I cooperated. I answered questions. I provided what I knew. But I did not build my life around a legal battle because Nora did not need to become a case file. What mattered at home was simple. Elise did not return with us. Camden's father, Todd, picked him up the next morning. I called Todd myself and told him enough truth that Camden would not believe he was being abandoned because of something he had done. He looked sick when he arrived. Did Camden know? I don't think so. He didn't. Camden came to see Nora later. He stood awkwardly beside her hospital bed and said, I thought you liked sleeping when my friends came over. Nora said, I didn't. He stared at the floor. Mom said you got overwhelmed because we were loud. Sometimes you were loud. I'm sorry. You didn't give it to me. Camden started crying. Nora reached for his hand. Children can be breathtakingly clear about responsibility when adults stop feeding them edited stories. The messages from Elise came in waves. First, denial. You are letting a confused child destroy our marriage. Then justification. I was alone with 2 kids while you flew around pretending work was more important than home. Then resentment. Nobody understands what it is like to live with a child who makes every happy moment about a dead woman. Then self-pity. I gave up years of my life trying to make your daughter feel included, and she never let me be enough. That message told me more than she intended. I replied once, you were allowed to feel overwhelmed, jealous, exhausted, angry, or resentful. You were not allowed to medicate a child so those feelings became easier to manage. After that, I stopped arguing. Marjorie called me cruel for throwing away a blended family. She said Elise had made one terrible judgment call during a stressful year. It wasn't one time. You don't know that. Nora does. Marjorie said children misremember things. Then why did your daughter hide a previous ambulance visit from me? Silence. Then she said, Elise knew you would overreact. That sentence is not helping her. Marjorie also blamed my travel. That part hurt because it was true enough to matter. You left her with Elise constantly, she said. You trusted her to do what you didn't want to be home to do. I wanted to shout that I worked to provide for everyone. Instead, I sat with the uglier truth. I had traveled too much. I had accepted explanations because they protected the career structure I liked. I had missed signs. Those were my failures. They did not become permission for Elise's choices. Adults can own their part without adopting someone else's guilt. I took a leave from work. My company survived, which humbled me more than I expected. I had spent years acting as if 3 distribution centers might collapse if I did not personally board a Tuesday flight. People covered projects. Calls moved online. Schedules changed. My daughter's childhood had been adapting around my calendar for years. It was finally my calendar's turn to adapt around her. When I returned, I moved into a Charlotte-based role with limited travel. I lost a chunk of my bonus. I slept better. Nora slept worse at first. Bedtime had become frightening. Unexpected drowsiness made her panic. We worked with her pediatrician and a therapist. We explained every ordinary medicine before she took it. We let her hold the bottle, read the label, ask what it was for. Her body needed to relearn that being tired could happen without somebody trying to erase her from the evening. She slept on a mattress beside my bed for almost 2 months. One night, around 3 in the morning, she woke me and asked, "Are you mad I still need this?" No. Mom Elise said big kids who need things all the time make adults tired. Adults are allowed to be tired. Kids are still allowed to need them. She was quiet. Both can be true? Yes. Okay. She went back to sleep. That tiny conversation meant more to me than every motivational speech I had ever heard about fatherhood. The wedding became another fracture line. Paige called crying after she learned what had really happened at the dress fitting. Elise had told her Nora had emotional episodes, and that reducing the bridal party would protect her. Paige believed her. "I thought I was helping," she said. "I never asked Nora. Most of us didn't." Paige offered to put Nora back in the wedding. I told her to ask Nora, not me. Nora said no. "I still want to go," she said, "but I don't want everyone watching if I cry." Paige accepted that without making Nora reassure her. That was the right response. The wedding was eventually moved to spring because the venue had storm damage, which removed the immediate pressure. Thanksgiving came first. Marjorie always hosted at her house in Ballantyne. I wanted to skip it. Nora wanted to see Camden. Camden wanted to see Nora, so I gave Nora full control. "We leave whenever you say, even before pie, even before mashed potatoes." That would be serious. Very. I gave Marjorie conditions too. No forcing hugs, no family photos without Nora's consent, no discussion blaming Nora for the separation, no pretending the hospital was a misunderstanding. Marjorie replied, "That sounds like rules for a courtroom." I answered, "Then we can stay home." She agreed. We arrived at 4. Elise was already there. I had not seen her in 7 weeks. She looked tired, thinner, no carefully styled family life glow. Nora stopped walking when she saw her. Elise did one thing right immediately. She stayed where she was. "Hi, Nora." "Hi. I won't come closer unless you want me to." Nora nodded but did not move. Camden came in from the den and asked, "Can I hug you?" Nora said yes. The fact that a 13-year-old understood consent faster than 3 generations of adults almost made me laugh. Dinner stayed calm for 40 minutes. Then Marjorie suggested a family picture before dessert. One private photo. Nobody posts it. Nora said, "No, thank you." Marjorie smiled too brightly. "Of course." Then she added, "It's just sad because this may be the first Thanksgiving we don't have one whole family picture." I put down my fork. "Marjorie, I'm allowed to be sad." Not at Nora. I didn't say anything to Nora. Nora looked up. "You said it because I said no." Marjorie blinked. "Sweetheart, I'm not blaming you." "It sounds like blaming," Elise whispered. "Mom, stop." Marjorie sighed. "Fine. Everyone is so careful now. One mistake and suddenly every sentence is dangerous." Nora's fork stopped. It wasn't one mistake. Nobody moved. Marjorie looked at Elise. Elise looked at Nora. "Honey," Marjorie said cautiously, "no one is saying what happened was okay. You said one mistake." "I meant one period when your mom was overwhelmed." Nora's face tightened. "She did it a lot." The room changed. "What do you mean a lot?" Paige asked. Nora looked at me. I gave her the choice with my face. She wanted to continue. When Camden had sleepovers. When Mom Elise had her wine friends. When Grandma came over and said I was making everything sad. Before wedding dresses. Sometimes if Dad was gone, and I kept asking to call. Marjorie stared at Elise. "Is that true?" Elise began crying. "Yes." The word was almost inaudible. Camden looked down at his hands. Paige covered her mouth. Marjorie said, "Elise, why?" Elise wiped her eyes. "Because I was exhausted. Because every evening became about whether Nora missed Grant or Rebecca, or whether something reminded her of Rebecca. Because Camden would ask why everything had to stop when Nora got upset. Because I was trying to make the house function." Nora whispered, "By making me sleep." Elise closed her eyes. "Yes." Marjorie immediately reached for the softer explanation. "You were carrying too much alone. Grant traveled constantly. Nora has always felt everything intensely. That would overwhelm anyone." Nora turned toward her. I wasn't intense. Marjorie opened her mouth. Nora continued. I was awake. Silence. Complete, brutal silence. Nora was not triumphant. She was tired. I hated that the clearest truth in the room had to come from a child. Elise started sobbing. You're right. Nora looked at her. About what? You weren't the problem. Then why did you tell Aunt Paige I was? Paige turned sharply. What? Elise looked at her sister. Nora said, she told me Aunt Paige didn't want me in the wedding because I make happy days stressful. Paige's chair scraped slightly against the floor. Elise, you told me Nora wanted out because she was overwhelmed. Elise covered her face. I thought it was better if neither of you blamed the other. Paige stared at her. So you made both of us blame ourselves. Elise had no answer. Camden spoke next. You did that to me too. Everyone looked at him. You said Nora hated when my friends came over and wanted to be left alone upstairs. I thought she didn't like us. Elise whispered his name. You made it sound like I was the reason she had to be put away. You were never the reason. Then why did you use me as the reason? Marjorie said, Camden, that's enough. He looked at his grandmother. Why? Because it's Thanksgiving? Marjorie went quiet. Paige asked Elise why Nora talking about Rebecca bothered her so much. Elise resisted, then finally said the thing I think she had spent years refusing to say aloud. Because Rebecca was perfect in this house. I stared at her. Rebecca was dead. Exactly. Her voice cracked. I could never have a bad day without feeling like everyone thought she would have handled it better. Nora kept photos. Grant kept traditions. Every time she cried for her mom, I felt like a substitute who would never be enough. She was 7. I know. She was grieving. I know. And instead of telling me you were drowning, you decided her grief was the thing to remove. Elise nodded, crying. Yes. There was nothing theatrical about it. The truth was uglier because it was ordinary. Jealousy, exhaustion, resentment, convenience. No secret villain plan, just an adult repeatedly choosing her own emotional comfort over a child's safety. Marjorie tried again. She is admitting it. How long are you going to punish her? I looked at her. Leaving a marriage that became unsafe for my daughter is not punishment. She lost her husband, her home, Todd, who had joined dinner so Camden would not be caught between households, spoke from the far end. Elise has a home. Marjorie looked at him. You know what I mean. I do. And Camden has a home too. Stop making Nora responsible for what adults lost. That ended the argument. Nora tugged my sleeve. Can we go? Right now. We stood. Elise did not ask Nora to stay. At the front door, she said, Nora, I'm sorry. Nora looked at her. I'm not old, family. Elise's face folded. No. Mom, Rebecca doesn't make me wrong. No. Okay. That was all Nora owed her. In the car, Nora was silent for several minutes. Then she asked, was I mean to Grandma? No. She cried. People can cry because the truth hurts and still need to hear it. Can I forgive Mom Elise and still not live with her? Yes. Can I not forgive her yet? Yes. Can I change my mind later? Yes. She looked out the window. That's a lot of yes. I laughed for the first time all day. You've had enough people deciding your no didn't matter. We stopped for milkshakes. Elise and I divorced quietly. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown because I did not need one for the story to end. The marriage had already ended emotionally. We separated our lives and moved forward. Elise stayed in therapy. Over time, her apologies changed. At first, they centered her pain. I lost everything. I hate who everyone thinks I am. I never meant for this to happen. Later, they began centering Nora. I taught her that her feelings were problems. I made her body carry my stress. I lied because I knew Grant would stop me. That difference mattered, though it did not erase anything. 6 months later, Elise wrote Nora a letter and asked me to decide whether to give it to her. I did not decide. I asked Nora if she wanted it. She said yes. The letter read, in part, I treated your sadness like noise. I treated your memories of your mom like competition. I tried to make you easier instead of becoming safer. You were never too much. I was asking a child to carry adult feelings so I would not have to. I am sorry. You do not have to make me feel better about what I did. Nora read it once and folded it carefully. Do I have to write back? No. Maybe someday. Maybe. Paige married Evan in April. Nora attended in a blue dress she chose herself. Paige asked her to do one private thing before guests arrived. There was a small memory table for relatives who had died. Paige asked whether Nora wanted to place a photograph of Rebecca there, because Rebecca had once babysat Paige when they were younger. Nora did. She stood beside the table for a long time, then came back and said, "Mom would have liked her flowers. I almost lost it." Elise attended but stayed across the aisle and did not approach Nora. Camden remained part of our lives. He stayed mostly with Todd, but he and Nora visited each other often. One afternoon, I overheard him apologize for enjoying being the easier child. "I knew Mom let me do more stuff," he said. "I thought it meant I was more responsible." Nora answered, "You were responsible about some things. I still liked being favorite. That wasn't your job to fix." He said, "I'm still sorry. That was enough. Children do not need perfect innocence to be worthy of compassion. They need adults who stop recruiting them into the hierarchy." Marjorie took almost a year to apologize without defending Elise. When she finally did, she came to our house alone and brought no gifts. "I protected my daughter because I could see her suffering," she told Nora. "I should have protected you because you were the child." Nora asked the same question she had begun asking every adult who apologized. "What happens if Mom Elise gets sad again?" Marjorie swallowed. "She has to be sad without making you smaller." Nora nodded. "Okay." Trust did not return immediately. It returned in ordinary increments. Marjorie asked before taking photos. She stopped calling Camden our boy in ways that made Nora sound temporary. She attended Nora's science fair without bringing up Elise. Progress is not dramatic enough for social media. That is why people miss how hard it is. My own change was less visible too. I moved into a regional planning role that cut my travel by nearly 70%. I earned less. I stopped measuring every career choice against the highest possible income. The first time my boss asked me to cover an emergency trip that overlapped with Nora's school weather presentation, I said no. He stared at me like I had changed species. "You've always been our travel guy." "Not anymore," another director went. The presentation happened. The company survived. Nora stood beside a homemade tornado model and scanned the crowd until she found me. When she did, her whole face relaxed. That expression told me exactly what years of bonus money had failed to buy. Presence. Not promised presence, actual presence. I also had to change how I thought about providing. After Rebecca died, I became obsessed with making sure Nora would never be financially unsafe. Life insurance, college savings, retirement accounts, good schools, big house. I confused protection with infrastructure. But children do not experience retirement planning at bedtime. They experience whether someone answers the phone when they are scared. They experience whether an adult believes them when they say something feels wrong. They experience who shows up in the bleachers. I had given Nora many good things. I had also given my work the first claim on my calendar and trusted love to fill the gaps automatically. Love does not fill gaps. People do. The following Thanksgiving, I hosted at my house. Small group: Nora, Camden, Todd, Paige and Evan, my sister Lauren, and 2 friends from work who had become family in the practical sense. No Marjorie because Nora was not ready for a full holiday with her. No Elise. We made too much food. I burned the rolls. Camden accused me of doing it intentionally so nobody would ask me to cook them again. After dinner, Paige asked whether anyone wanted a picture. Then she corrected herself. "Actually, who wants a picture?" Camden said yes. Nora thought for a moment. 1. We put my phone on a timer. Nobody arranged her. Nobody told her to smile. She stood between Camden and me holding a dinner fork because she had forgotten to put it down. Lauren's eyes were closed. Todd was mid-laugh. It was not a good photograph by Elise's standards. It was my favorite family picture. Elise had been brilliant at producing images of peace. I had learned that peace and safety are different. Peace can be staged. Safety is messier. Safety lets a child say no to the photograph without losing her place at the table. Safety allows someone to cry during Thanksgiving without making the entire holiday their fault. Safety allows memories of a dead mother to sit beside a living future without demanding that one erase the other. Nora is 12 now. She still loves weather. There is a little station in our backyard measuring wind and rainfall, and she sends me forecasts from the next room as if we live in different states. She still hates bananas. She plays clarinet badly and paints beautifully. She sleeps normally most nights. Certain artificial grape smells still make her uncomfortable, so we avoid them. She asks what medicine is before taking anything, and no adult in her life is allowed to mock that. She has occasional contact with Elise now because she asked for it after almost 2 years. I did not push her toward forgiveness or away from it. Their first meeting happened at a public park. Nora wanted me nearby, but not at the table. Elise brought no presents and made no big speech. They talked about school, Camden, and a dog Elise had adopted. 20 minutes later, Nora came back to the car. How was it? Weird. Good weird or bad weird? Middle weird. Middle weird counts. She nodded. I do not know what their relationship will become. I no longer believe fatherhood means controlling every outcome. My job is to make sure Nora knows she is allowed to choose closeness based on safety, not guilt. There is one photograph in our hallway that changed after the divorce. It shows Rebecca holding toddler Nora at a pumpkin patch. For years, I kept most photographs of Rebecca in Nora's bedroom because I worried displaying them around the house might make Elise feel like she was competing with a ghost. I understand now how backwards that was. A dead mother did not need to disappear so a living adult could feel secure. Rebecca belongs in Nora's story. Her memory does not reduce anyone else. A family friend once asked why there were more pictures of Rebecca now. Nora answered before I could, because nobody has to hide my mom anymore. That sentence hurt, but it also told me we were moving in the right direction. Self-worth became something different for both of us. For Nora, it meant learning that she was not difficult because she cried, remembered, interrupted, asked questions, hated certain dresses, disliked cameras, or wanted her father. Children should not have to become easy to deserve care. For me, self-worth meant accepting that I could be called dramatic, unforgiving, controlling, or selfish, without rushing to prove I was none of those things. Boundaries are not arguments you win. They are decisions you live. I stopped debating whether Elise meant to harm Nora. Intent mattered, but it did not outrank impact. I stopped debating whether Marjorie thought she was protecting her daughter. She was. She was simply protecting the wrong person from the wrong consequence. I stopped explaining why I traveled. I had good reasons. Good reasons still produced absence. Taking responsibility became strangely freeing because it let me change what was mine without absorbing what was not. Looking back, the hallway was not where the story began. It began in tiny moments. A child described as sensitive, while another was called confident. A school email I forwarded instead of questioning. A family photo where Nora slowly disappeared. A wedding roll removed because an adult wanted the day to be easier. A grandmother calling one child our boy and the other sweet girl. A father who noticed pieces but repaired them quietly because confrontation felt bigger than the injury. By the time I found Nora on the kitchen floor, the family had already practiced making her smaller for years. The medicine was only the most dangerous version of the same message. Everybody else's comfort matters more than your full presence. That is why I tell people now to watch the child everyone calls easy, difficult, dramatic, mature, resilient, independent, or sensitive. Those labels can describe real traits. They can also become excuses adults use to give one child less patience and another more freedom. Watch the child who stops asking to go places. Watch the child who says, "It's fine," too quickly. Watch the child whose face changes when a particular adult enters the room. You do not need paranoia. You need curiosity. Ask again. Stay on the phone. Read the school email twice. Show up unexpectedly sometimes. Trust is important in families, but trust should never require blindness. Most of all, do not confuse family peace with family health. Our old house looked peaceful online, matching pajamas, beautiful tables, smiling children, caption after caption about gratitude and blended love. Behind those pictures was a little girl learning how to stay quiet so adults would keep choosing her. The life we have now looks less polished. Sometimes Nora refuses pictures. Sometimes Camden comes over and they argue about what movie to watch. Sometimes Thanksgiving ends early because someone is tired. Sometimes Rebecca's name makes me sad at dinner. Nobody fixes that sadness. Nobody has to. That is what safety finally looks like to me. Not the absence of difficult feelings, but the absence of punishment for having them. I would choose that imperfect house over every perfect photograph we ever posted. So tell me honestly, if you came home early and discovered the spouse you trusted had been secretly giving your child sedating medicine whenever that child became emotionally inconvenient, and the extended family defended it as one overwhelmed step-parent trying to keep the peace. Could years of genuine remorse and changed behavior ever earn that person a place in your child's life again? Or would some betrayals create a boundary that should never fully reopen?